Trent McCleary, ice hockey. On January 29, 2000, the Montreal Canadiens were playing the Philadelphia Flyers at the Molson Center. Trent McCleary was a 27-year-old forward who never got drafted. He made the NHL by doing what other players wouldn't. He threw himself in front of shots. In the second period, Flyers defenseman Chris Therien wound up for a shot. McCleary dropped to the ice to block it. The puck hit him in the throat. The impact broke his voice box and collapsed his right lung. His throat swelled shut and filled with blood. He was suffocating. Without air, the brain starts dying in 4 minutes. McCleary got up and skated to the bench, spitting blood. He tried to tell the trainer he couldn't breathe. Then he passed out. Medical staff rushed him into the hallway. A breathing tube wouldn't fit through his swollen throat. They poked through with a needle. 17 minutes later, he was in surgery, still in full gear and skates. Doctors cut a hole in his throat to get him air. His doctor said he came as close as you could come to dying. After surgery, McCleary couldn't talk. He wrote his teammates a note. It said, "Doing well. Here's 500 on the board for the win. Battle hard. Go Habs." He didn't speak again for 6 weeks. His throat healed 15% narrower than before. He tried to come back but couldn't last a single shift. He never played again. Years later, he said he'd do it again. Jeb Corliss, wingsuit flying. On January 16, 2012, Jeb Corliss jumped off Table Mountain in Cape Town, South Africa. He was wearing a wingsuit, a suit that lets you glide through the air like a flying squirrel. Corliss was 35 and had been doing this for 18 years. The plan was to fly between two balloons on a ledge. Another jumper went first as a test. Nobody noticed the wind from his flight pushed the balloons lower, closer to the rock. Corliss jumped. At 120 miles per hour, his left foot clipped a boulder and his body slammed into the side of the mountain. The suit ripped apart. He flipped and tumbled down the rock. He had a choice. Pull his parachute and die slow, or don't pull and hit the mountain. He pulled. The parachute opened. Corliss crashed onto a hiking trail. He was alive. Both ankles were broken. His shin was gashed to the bone. Inside both thighs, the impact tore the muscles clean off the bones under the skin. Doctors called it degloving. As they loaded him into the ambulance, a paramedic said it looked like a double amputation. Corliss heard that. If they were talking about cutting off his legs, it meant he wasn't dead yet. The crushed muscle from his legs leaked into his blood. By the time he got to the hospital, his kidneys were shutting down. He spent a year recovering in South Africa. He refused painkillers. 3 years later, he said this sport is going to kill him. He still jumps. Elena Bereznaya, figure skating. On January 9, 1996, Elena Bereznaya was at a rink in Riga, Latvia, training with her skating partner Oleg Shliakov. It was a morning practice. They were doing side-by-side spins, both leaning forward with one leg stretched out behind them. Their blades were moving inches apart. Shliakov drifted too close. His skate blade came up and sliced into the side of her head. It cut right through the bone. That part of the skull is one of the thinnest. There was nothing between the blade and her brain. The force pushed pieces of bone into the brain. Most people don't survive that. The pieces damaged her speech center and Bereznaya couldn't talk. The right side of her body went limp. Doctors weren't sure she would walk again. She had 2 operations to pull the pieces out. A skater named Anton Sikaralidze came to get her. He put her on a night train to St. Petersburg for better care. Sikaralidze was 19. He read to her every day. When she couldn't respond, he kept talking anyway. 2 months after the blade went into her skull, Bereznaya stepped onto the ice again. She said she had no dreams about the future. All she thought about was those first steps. She and Sikaralidze started competing together later that year. They took bronze at their first event. 2 years later, they won the World Championship. Olympic gold came in 2002. Her speech never fully came back. Kevin Everett, American football. It was September 9, 2007. The Buffalo Bills were playing the Denver Broncos at Ralph Wilson Stadium. First game of the season. Kevin Everett was a 25-year-old tight end on the kickoff team. On the second half kickoff, Everett ran to tackle returner Dominic Hickson. Their helmets hit. Everett went stiff and fell face first into the turf. He didn't get up. No thumbs up, no wave. Players waited for a sign he was okay. Nothing came. The only thing moving was his eyes. The third and fourth bones in his neck were broken and knocked out of place. At that level, the spinal cord controls breathing and everything below it. If it gets cut, you die. Everett's was nearly cut through. He was paralyzed from the shoulders down. 13 minutes after the hit, the team surgeon pumped ice-cold salt water into Everett's veins in the ambulance. No one had tried this for a spinal cord injury before. The cold slows the swelling and stops it from killing the nerves that are still alive. There was no rule book for it. The surgeon had learned about it at a seminar a year earlier. That was the only reason he knew to try. 2 days later, Everett wiggled a toe. Then he moved an arm. Then both hands. 3 months after that, he walked onto the field at Ralph Wilson Stadium on his own. No wheelchair. No walker. He never played football again. Alex Zanardi, motorsport. On September 15, 2001, Alex Zanardi was racing at the Lausitzring in Germany. He was 34, Italian, and a 2-time racing champion. With 13 laps to go, Zanardi was leading. He came into the pits for fuel and pulled back onto the track. His tires caught the grass. The car spun and stopped sideways across the racing surface. Patrick Carpentier swerved and missed him. Alex Tagliani right behind could not. He hit the side of Zanardi's car at close to 200 miles per hour. The car split in two. Both of Zanardi's legs were gone, torn off and scattered across the track in pieces. Both main arteries in his legs were ripped open, and blood poured down the track. The first doctor to reach him slipped in it. He had to crawl the rest of the way on his knees. Zanardi lost over 70% of his blood. His heart stopped 7 times. A priest came and prayed over him. He survived over 15 minutes with less than a liter of blood. Doctors said that should not be possible. He woke up days later. His legs were gone. Zanardi designed and built his own prosthetic legs. He went back to racing. Then he took up hand cycling and won Paralympic gold in London in 2012. 4 years later, he won gold again in Rio. Bethany Hamilton, surfing. On October 31, 2003, Bethany Hamilton went surfing at Tunnels Beach on the north shore of Kauai, Hawaii. She was 13 years old, already had sponsors, and was expected to go pro. Her best friend and her friend's father came with her. The water was clear. The waves were small. There was no sign of anything in the water. Hamilton was lying on her board with her left arm hanging in the water. A 14-foot tiger shark came up from below and bit down. It took her entire left arm just below the shoulder. The whole thing lasted about 2 or 3 seconds. The water around her turned red. Hamilton didn't scream. She paddled toward shore with one arm. Her friend's father reached her and wrapped a surfboard leash around the stump to slow the bleeding. At 60% blood loss, most people die. By the time she got to the hospital, she had passed that number. Her father was already there that morning for knee surgery. They wheeled him out of the operating room and wheeled her in. Same room, same doctor. There was no arm left to save. The shark had taken it clean. 26 days later, Hamilton got back on a surfboard. 10 weeks after that, she entered a competition. She taught herself to surf with one arm, kicking harder to make up for what was gone. She won her first national title in 2005. She still surfs professionally. Fabrice Muamba, football. On March 17, 2012, Bolton Wanderers were playing Tottenham in an FA Cup quarterfinal at White Hart Lane. Fabrice Muamba was a 23-year-old midfielder. 30,000 fans were in the stadium. Millions more watched on television. 41 minutes in, Muamba dropped near the halfway line. Nobody was near him. Nobody touched him. His heart had stopped. When the heart stops, the brain starts shutting down in minutes. After 10, most people are gone. A team doctor reached him in seconds and started pushing on his chest. They shocked his heart twice on the pitch. Nothing happened. Up in the stands, a heart doctor named Andrew Diener saw Muamba go down. He was only at the game because his nephew couldn't use the ticket. Diener talked his way past a steward and ran onto the pitch. He told the ambulance crew to skip the nearest hospital and go to his instead. They shocked Muamba 13 more times in the ambulance. None of them worked. When they arrived, he had been dead for 48 minutes. Doctors shocked him 15 more times. His heart still would not start. A machine kept pushing on his chest. Then, 78 minutes after his heart stopped, it started again on its own. Nobody expected him to wake up. His club doctor said he didn't believe Muamba would ever open his eyes again. 2 weeks later, a photo came out of him sitting up in bed, smiling. He retired at 24. He now coaches kids at Bolton. Pritchard Cullen, boxing. On October 17, 2015, Pritchard Cullen fought Terrell Williams at Eagle Bank Arena in Virginia. Cullen was 23 from Puerto Rico, undefeated at 16-0. 13 of those wins were knockouts. Through the first 5 rounds, Cullen was ahead on all 3 scorecards. Then Williams started hitting him in the back of the head. In boxing, those are called rabbit punches. They are illegal because the brainstem sits right there. A hard enough hit can kill you, Cullen told the referee. The referee told him to take care of it himself. Williams kept throwing them. In the 7th round, Cullen walked to the ringside doctor with his hand on the back of his head. He said he was dizzy. The doctor let him keep fighting. By the 9th, Williams had knocked Cullen down twice. Between rounds, his corner took off his gloves, thinking the fight was over. The referee disqualified him. Cullen made it to the dressing room. He tried to sit in a chair and fell to the floor. He started vomiting. Inside his skull, blood was pooling between his brain and the bone. The bleeding was crushing his brain from the inside. Surgeons cut open his skull to let the swelling out. Cullen went into a coma. He stayed in it for 221 days. When he woke up, he couldn't move. He couldn't talk. He couldn't eat on his own. His mother feeds him, bathes him, and speaks for him. That was 10 years ago. Nothing has changed. Niki Lauda, Formula 1. On August 1, 1976, 27-year-old Austrian world champion Niki Lauda was racing in the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. Before the race, he tried to get the other drivers to refuse to race. He said the track was too dangerous. They voted against him by 1 vote. 2 laps in, his Ferrari snapped to the right at a fast bend. It hit a wall of dirt, bounced back onto the track, and burst into flames. Lauda was trapped inside. 4 other drivers stopped and pulled him out. The fire burned away his eyelids and most of his scalp. Half of his right ear was gone. His hands were burned through to the flesh. He breathed in hot, poisonous gas that damaged his lungs. A priest was called. They thought he was going to die. He was in a coma for days. 42 days later, Lauda showed up at the Italian Grand Prix. Blood soaked through the bandages under his helmet. He could not close his eyes because his eyelids were gone. He finished fourth. The 1976 championship went to James Hunt by a single point. Lauda won the title back the next year. Then he retired. Came back in 1984 and won it again. 3 world championships total. For the rest of his life, Lauda wore a red cap to cover the scars. The lung damage from the fire never healed. He died in 2019. Clint Malarchuk, ice hockey. On March 22, 1989, the Buffalo Sabres were playing the St. Louis Blues at the Odd in Buffalo. Clint Malarchuk was in net. First period. 2 players crashed into the crease. As they fell, Steve Tuttle's skate blade caught Malarchuk on the right side of his neck. It cut his carotid artery and part of his jugular vein. The carotid carries blood to the brain. A cut one can kill you in minutes. Blood shot out with every heartbeat. The white ice turned red. 11 fans fainted, and 2 had heart attacks. 3 players threw up on the ice. Sabres trainer Jim Pizzatelli sprinted out. He had been a combat medic in Vietnam. He reached into the wound and pinched the artery shut with his fingers. He did not let go until doctors took over. Malarchuk was awake through all of it. He wanted off the ice because his mother was watching on television. He did not want her to see him die. Doctors used 300 stitches to close the wound. He lost a third of his blood. He was back on the ice 10 days later. Nobody gave him counseling. He had PTSD, and nobody knew for 20 years. He drank to quiet his brain. In 2008, he put a rifle under his chin and pulled the trigger. The bullet went through his chin, his teeth, and his mouth. It stopped just short of his brain. It is still there. He survived that too. He works in mental health now. Alex Smith, American football. On November 18, 2018, Washington quarterback Alex Smith was hit by 2 Houston defenders in the third quarter. His right leg broke in a spiral from his ankle to his knee. The bone came through the skin. He was 34. Doctors put in 3 plates and 28 screws. They told him he'd be out in 2 days. He stayed. By Wednesday night, he could barely stay awake. His fever kept climbing. His blood pressure was dropping. They ran tests and found bacteria in his blood. The infection was spreading. His body was shutting down. Thursday morning, a doctor unwrapped his bandages. A few hours earlier, the leg looked fine. Now it was black. They rushed him back into surgery. The infection had spread through the muscle and skin in his leg. It was flesh-eating bacteria. Nobody knows how it got in. For a week straight, doctors cut him open every day to remove dead skin and muscle. 8 surgeries. When they were done, his shin bone was exposed from knee to ankle. No muscle, no skin, just bone. Doctors said his leg now looked more like a military blast injury than a sports injury. He had 2 options: amputate, or let doctors move muscle from his left leg to cover the bone. There was no guarantee it would work. He chose the transfer. 17 surgeries total over 9 months. In 2020, Alex Smith started at quarterback again. He was voted comeback player of the year. Romain Grosjean, Formula 1. 44 years after Lauda burned at the Nürburgring, it happened again. On November 29, 2020, Romain Grosjean was racing in the Bahrain Grand Prix, first lap. His car clipped another driver and shot off the track at 120 miles per hour. It hit a metal barrier and went straight through it. The car split in 2. The fuel tank tore open. Everything caught fire. Grosjean was strapped into the front half, buried inside the barrier, surrounded by flames. The fire was over 1,500 degrees. His racing suit could protect him for about 20 seconds. He was in there for 28. He tried to climb out, but his seatbelt was stuck. He sat back down. His mind went to Niki Lauda, then to his 3 kids watching at home. He tried again. His left foot was jammed in the wreckage. He pulled until his foot came out of his shoe. He stood up in the flames and jumped over the barrier. 1 shoe gone. 1 glove gone. Covered in soot. Alive. A piece of curved titanium above the cockpit had pushed the metal rail over his head on impact. Without it, the rail would have hit him in the helmet. It was called a halo. The cars had only had them since 2018. Grosjean had argued against putting it on. He walked away with burns on his hands. No broken bones. His left hand still aches when the temperature drops.